we go from me to we, or from I to us, and then that sense of us and we expands, and to some people it becomes a kind of universality. And with some people it stops. So what Ken Wilber calls world-centric is going from me to us to all of us. So it becomes a kind of globalized sense of human family. What I propose here is that that's not enough either. That somewhere along the way, how can I put this? If that was all we could accomplish, it would be great. If we could get more people to be world-centric and to identify with all of humanity and extend their care and concern to all of humanity, the globalization of the mind would take a huge step, and we would be very much better off. But there's more. There's what we might call cosmocentric, or this is another Ken Wilber term, where the sense of kinship, the sense of identification, is not just an idea, and it's not just knowing something intellectually. It's more deeply felt, and it extends beyond other human beings to all species, to all beings, to the planet, to the universe. It's an expansion that does not stop. So horizontally, there are these developmental stages or processes that can go beyond what we normally think of as pluralism. The other thing is that there's this vertical quality. You can be very pluralistic in a superficial way, or you can be pluralistic in a very deep way. It's not enough to say, oh yes, I accept everybody, and I accept all the differences, and I appreciate the oneness of humanity. How deeply felt is that? Is it just an idea? Is it just a concept? Or is it deeply felt? Does it touch the heart? Does it touch the soul? Is it something that really is transformative and changes the way people behave? That quality of depth is something I think that everybody concerned with this subject needs to keep in mind. And it's my contention, my experience, that just as there are ways to encourage and develop earlier stages of this expansion, there are ways to extend it even further and ways to deepen it. To the point where the sense of connection that we've been talking about, where we identify with and feel connected to others, even that sense of connection can be deepened and transcended. Because I can feel connected to somebody. I feel connected to my friends. Diana is an old friend of mine. I feel connected to her, but that's not the same connection I have for my brother. And the connection I feel to my brother is not what I feel for my wife. And when I argue with my wife, this is a different sense of connection than when I adore my wife. And so there's degrees of connection. And then there's beyond connection. Because you feel connected to somebody, but you're still separate. But there's a sense to which connection becomes union. A unity of consciousness where the sense of identification with another is beyond just I feel connected. It's a cognition of oneness that goes beyond ordinary connection. Now we're in the realm of the transpersonal or the spiritual, which is an appropriate thing because this is a spiritual conference. Which brings me back to my personal story and the story I tell in my book of the influence of the East, and in particular, in my case, the tradition that some people would think of as Hinduism, but that aspect of it that has most impacted us in the West, the philosophies of Vedanta and the methodologies and mode of understanding that we think of as yoga. And by yoga, I mean the whole package of yoga, not the average yoga studio exercises. So we come to, in the story, to what decade is that? The 60s were a fascinating time for those of you to whom the 60s is something you learn about in ancient history classes. Pay attention to your own. We lived it. It was a strange time and in many ways ridiculous and destructive time. But it was also a turning point, I think, in our spiritual history. And one of the reasons for that was, at least among the young people in the counterculture, India was permeated. Sort of the essence of India had come to permeate the counterculture. In some superficial ways, incense and posters and that sort of thing. But the teachings of India started to be spread. It was a question of supply and demand. It was kind of a perfect storm of supply and demand. From the demand side, you had this generation, baby boomer, you could say, who were coming of age, very discontent with the world as it was, very discontent with the presumed wisdom that was being passed down to us. We wanted answers to the big questions, and they were not forthcoming. They were not forthcoming from secular sources because we started to get disillusioned with Marxism and Freud and all the other schools of thought that were fashionable. And they were not forthcoming from conventional religion. We wanted to know what life was about, where one finds meaning and purpose, where one finds fulfillment, where one finds high levels of consciousness. How can one fix the world that seems so messed up? And what are we doing here? And what is our place in the cosmos? At the same time, the supply side came together because of new technologies and speed of communication and transportation and the availability of teachers from India because of changes in the U.S. immigration